He walked into that shelter to donate warm blankets, and walked out carrying the cold truth of his entire past. When his eyes met the old woman's, time seemed to stop. In that single moment, the life he had always believed was his came crashing down. But for the first time, he felt free, like his heart had finally found its missing piece. It had started like any other Monday in Seattle. Gray skies pressing down on the city, rain whispering against the glass. Ethan Cole, 36, tech entrepreneur, philanthropist, and local golden boy, had no idea he was about to meet the person who'd been erased from his story. He stepped inside Harbor Lights nursing home with his assistant and a signed check for $500,000. He wanted to expand the center's memory care wing. He believed in giving back. After all, the world had given him everything. Then he heard the shouting. "Please, Ms. Reed, you can't wander into other rooms again," a nurse cried, trying to steer an elderly woman away. The woman's silver hair was a wild halo. Her slippers dragged. But her eyes, sharp, tired, too knowing, locked onto Ethan as if she'd been waiting for him all her life. The nurse sighed when she noticed him. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole. This is Miriam Reed, one of our more difficult residents. She keeps talking about her son, a boy who grew up to build towers and change the world." Ethan froze. A son who built towers. "She insists his name was Ethan," the nurse added with an embarrassed laugh. "She tells that story every day." The world tilted. Ethan's pen slipped from his hand. "Ethan," the old woman whispered, voice trembling but certain. "You came back," the nurse forced a nervous smile. "She says that to strangers sometimes, just dementia." But Ethan wasn't listening. His pulse hammered. A memory, warm sunlight, the smell of cinnamon, a woman humming while stirring something on a stove, flashed across his mind. He knelt beside her wheelchair. "Do we know each other?" Her hand rose slowly, brushing his face as if confirming something sacred. "You had freckles on your left cheek. You used to call me Mama Mim." He couldn't breathe. That name, buried somewhere deep, hit him like thunder. The nurse stepped forward. "Mr. Cole, maybe we should—" Ethan's voice cut like steel. "Who admitted her here? That's confidential." "Not anymore." He turned to his assistant. "Daniel, get me everything. Medical records, intake forms, payment history. I want names, dates, all of it." The nurse's smile faltered. "Mr. Cole, please, there's no need." "There's every need," Ethan said quietly. "Because this woman just remembered something the rest of you worked very hard to make me forget." Miriam's fingers tightened around his. "They said you were better off. That a poor woman couldn't raise a boy meant for greatness." Her voice broke. "They took you one night. Said I wasn't fit. I screamed until my throat bled." Ethan felt the room shrink. The sound of rain outside blurred into static. All these years his parents had told him he'd been rescued, that his birth mother had died when he was 5. Now, sitting across from this trembling woman, he realized he'd been living inside someone else's story. That night, the city lights looked colder than usual from his penthouse window. He replayed her voice again and again. "They said you were better off." He had grown up grateful, disciplined, trained to never ask questions. Now questions were all he had. Who signed the papers? Who decided Miriam Reed was unfit? And how many others had they silenced? He poured a glass of water and set it down untouched. The reflection staring back from the window didn't look like the man on magazine covers. It looked like a stranger built from lies. His phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Got something? The woman's care bills are paid by a private trust. Guess whose name is on it? Robert and Elaine Cole, his adoptive parents." Ethan felt the air leave his chest. So they knew. They'd been paying for Miriam's silence all these years. He whispered to the dark. "This ends now." He didn't know yet how deep the rot went, or how many powerful people had made fortunes off stolen families. But that night, he swore he'd dig until the truth had nowhere left to hide. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, his desk covered with printouts, phone records, and old photos he barely recognized. The city outside kept shining, like it didn't care his life had just split in half. By morning, he had a plan. He wasn't just Ethan Cole, billionaire philanthropist anymore. He was a man with questions, and enough money to make anyone answer them. "Daniel," he said, pacing his office, "find out who handled my adoption. Every name, every signature. I don't care how far back it goes." Daniel hesitated. "Ethan, you sure you want to open that door?" Some things need the light," Ethan cut in. He turned toward the window, rain streaking down the glass. Below, the people looked small, moving through their lives, trusting the system that had stolen his mother. Not for long, he thought. By evening, Daniel returned with a thin folder and a pale face. "Ethan, this is bigger than I thought. Your adoption was handled by a private legal firm called Whitmore and Lee. They specialized in, high-profile placements. The lawyer's name was Charles Whitmore. He died years ago, but the firm still runs. And there's something else. Miriam wasn't just removed. She was committed to a psychiatric clinic." Ethan froze mid-step. "Committed?" "Yeah, a Dr. Philip Crane signed the papers. The report says she suffered delusions of maternity and attachment disorder." "But the signature—" "Look." Daniel slid the file forward. The doctor's signature looked shaky, wrong, like someone had forged it in a rush. Ethan's hands trembled, but his voice didn't. "They declared her insane to take me away." The next afternoon, he walked into Harbor Lights again, but not as a donor. This time, he brought a full medical team. "Miriam Reed is to be transferred to my care immediately," he told the administrator. "I'll handle all costs." The nurse from before looked nervous. "Mr. Cole, you can't just—" He handed her a signed court order. "I can. And I just did." Dr. Amanda Shaw, a neurologist from the city hospital, examined Miriam for hours. When she was done, her face was pale. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly, "this woman doesn't have dementia. She's been heavily medicated, antipsychotics, sedatives, for decades. Whoever's been signing her prescriptions wasn't trying to treat her. They were keeping her quiet." Ethan clenched his fists. "Who authorized those medications?" "Same signature," Amanda said, showing the files. "Dr. Crane. But here's the thing. Dr. Crane retired 23 years ago." The room spun. Ethan steadied himself on the edge of the desk. "So someone's been using a dead man's name to keep her locked away." That night, Ethan visited Miriam again. The drugs were finally wearing off. Her eyes were clearer. He brought her a photo, one his adoptive parents had framed for decades. A picture of little Ethan in front of a white farmhouse. "Do you recognize this place?" he asked. She took a long look, then nodded slowly. "That's my house. You used to chase fireflies in that yard." He swallowed hard. "Then why does it say Cole Estate in the deed?" Her lips trembled. "They took it. The lawyer said it was payment for my care, but it wasn't payment. It was punishment." He felt a wave of nausea. They hadn't just stolen his life, they'd stolen hers too. Her home, her dignity, her years. "Ethan," Daniel said later that night, bursting into his office, "you need to see this." He dropped a stack of papers on the desk. "Those same lawyers, Whitmore and Lee, they've done this before. 15 times. Always the same pattern. Poor caregiver. Rich family. Fake diagnosis. Adoption. Payoff." Ethan stared at the list of names. Nannies, housekeepers, distant relatives, all erased from their children's lives. "How long?" he whispered. 40 years. Ethan sat down slowly. "This isn't adoption. It's trafficking. And they did it in my name." The next morning, a voice he hadn't heard in weeks called him. "Ethan," said Robert Cole, his adoptive father, smooth and practiced as ever. "I hear you've been digging into old stories." You don't want to get lost in ghosts, son. Ethan's voice was cold. Why did you lie to me? Robert sighed. We gave you everything. A future, an education, love. You gave me a lie wrapped in charity. He paused, letting silence sting. And you buried the only woman who ever told me the truth. Robert's tone hardened. You don't know what you're dealing with. Oh, I do, Ethan said. And so will the world. He hung up. That night, Daniel looked at him across the desk. What's next? Ethan stared at the wall of evidence. Photos, contracts, maps, strings of red connecting faces and names. Next? He said quietly. We burn the lie down. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Cole, golden boy of Seattle, felt like he was finally standing on solid ground. The truth. Ugly. Heavy. But his at last. 3 days later, Ethan sat in his office, surrounded by chaos. Papers, voice recordings, and photographs scattered across the table. The walls that had once held awards and magazine covers now carried maps, strings, and names written in red ink. He had built companies before. Now he was building something else. A reckoning. Daniel, he said, eyes fixed on the board. We need someone who knows how to hit where it hurts. Legally. Daniel nodded. Already one step ahead of you. There's a lawyer, Maria Navarro. She used to work with the state's corruption unit. Hates dirty money. Hates elite families even more. Ethan allowed himself a brief, humorless smile. Perfect. Set it up. Maria arrived the next morning. She was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, all focus and quiet fury. As she flipped through the files, her brow furrowed deeper. This isn't just illegal, she said. It's systemic. You've got forged medical records, bribes, and falsified psychiatric reports, all to steal children from their caregivers. It's a 40-year operation, Ethan exhaled slowly. Can we take it down? She met his gaze. With what you have here, we can burn their world to the ground. Later that night, Ethan walked into Miriam's new room. Clean, quiet, softly lit. She was sketching something. A small house, a front yard, 2 figures holding hands. Do you remember that? He asked. Every blade of grass, she whispered. You used to call the porch light our little star. You said as long as it was on, I'd always find my way home. Ethan swallowed hard. You did, Mama Mim. You found your way back. Her smile trembled. Now it's your turn. The next day, Maria and Ethan sat in a private office downtown. On the screen were dozens of files, bank transfers, signatures, and hidden payments from the Whitmore Trust. Maria pointed. These transfers link the nursing home, the psychiatric clinic, and your adoptive parents' foundation. It's one web, and the same trust funds 15 other care facilities across the country. Ethan's jaw tightened. 15 homes, 15 stolen families. And we're only seeing the surface. Maria leaned forward. You need an ally inside the system. Someone who can open doors we can't. I know a prosecutor who won't flinch. Who? Tanya Brooks, state's special investigator. Tough, honest, and she doesn't care whose name is on the check. 2 days later, Ethan met Tanya in a secure conference room. She was a tall woman with calm authority, her badge clipped neatly to her blazer. Mr. Cole, she said, scanning the files, what you're showing me could shake this state to its core, but it's going to destroy reputations, including your own. I'm fine with that, Ethan replied. I just want the truth. Tanya studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then we'll start quietly. Surveillance, subpoenas, medical audits. Once we have enough, we go public. That night, Ethan returned home to find a message waiting. No number, just a voice. You think you can dig up the past, Ethan? Some graves are better left closed. He froze, playing it again. The voice was distorted, but the arrogance was familiar. Robert, Ethan, smiled grimly. So now he's scared. The following week was a blur of tension and discovery. Tanya's team unearthed decades of hidden crimes: adoption fraud, forged death certificates, offshore accounts. Every thread led back to the same circle of names. Then one morning, Maria burst into Ethan's office, holding her phone. "They slipped," she said, eyes blazing. "We intercepted a transfer. $2 million wired from the Whitmore Trust to a clinic in Oregon. They're moving assets before the storm hits." Ethan stood up. "Then let's make it rain." That night, a storm really did roll over Seattle, thunder cracking like a warning. Ethan stood by his window watching lightning flash across the skyline when his phone rang again. It was his adoptive father. "Ethan." Robert's voice trembled, more pleading now. "We can fix this. You don't understand the damage you're doing." "Oh, I understand," Ethan said, voice calm, almost soft. "You didn't just buy a child. You buried a mother. You made sure she'd never speak again. You're ruining everything," Robert snapped. "The family name," Ethan cut him off. "The family name died the day you forged that signature." He hung up. The next morning, Tanya's team executed the first wave of search warrants. Federal agents swept through Whitmore and Lee, the clinic, and the nursing home. Files were seized. Accounts frozen. Miriam watched the news from her hospital bed, eyes wide with disbelief. "They're really doing it," she whispered. "They're finally listening." Ethan sat beside her, taking her hand. "They're listening because of you," she smiled faintly. "No, my boy. They're listening because you remembered." That night, the first headline broke. "Adoption fraud ring linked to prominent families. Investigations underway." And just like that, the walls began to crumble. Ethan wasn't sure what would happen next, to his family, his company, or his reputation. But for the first time in his life, he didn't care. Because now, the world knew what he knew. Some lies are too big to stay buried. And this one was about to explode. It happened just after sunrise. A line of black SUVs rolled through downtown Seattle, engines humming like thunder before a storm. By 7 a.m., 18 locations across the state were raided at once: law offices, clinics, homes, and private banks. The operation had a name: Project Homecoming. Ethan stood beside Prosecutor Tanya Brooks in a glass-walled control room, screens showing every raid in real time. Agents in dark jackets swept through corridors collecting evidence, escorting suspects in handcuffs. Tanya's voice crackled through the radio. "Team Alpha, confirm custody of Robert and Elaine Cole." "Confirmed," replied an agent. Ethan's hands tightened around the edge of the table. On one of the screens, he saw them, his adoptive parents, being led out of their mansion, wrists bound, their faces drained of the pride they used to wear like armor. Tanya glanced at him. "You don't have to watch this." "Yes," he said quietly. "I do." A few hours later, Ethan walked into the press conference, cameras flashing, reporters shouting his name. He wasn't here as the tech icon anymore. He was here as the son who'd found the truth. At the podium, Tanya spoke first. "For over 40 years," she said, "a network of lawyers, doctors, and powerful families used psychiatric fraud and adoption loopholes to steal children from their caregivers. Today, that network no longer exists." Behind her, slides flashed. Documents, bank records, photographs of forged medical charts, Tanya continued. "This investigation began with one woman, Miriam Reed, whose courage helped uncover the truth." Murmurs filled the room. Cameras zoomed in on the elderly woman sitting in the front row. Miriam wore a pale blue dress and a soft smile, her eyes full of quiet strength. When Ethan stepped to the microphone, the crowd fell silent. He looked out over a sea of faces: reporters, victims, officials, and for the first time, his voice didn't shake. "I grew up believing my life was built on love and generosity," he began. "But it was built on silence, someone else's suffering. My mother wasn't unfit. She was erased. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure no one else is. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was steady, heavy with meaning. That night, the news dominated every channel. Headlines flashed across the country. Cole family exposed in adoption fraud ring. Tech CEO's whistleblower confession triggers statewide arrests. Decades of lies uncovered. Dozens of families reunited. Social media erupted. Justice for Miriam trended for days. Donations poured in to help other families find missing loved ones. But inside the Seattle Detention Center, Robert Cole sat behind glass, staring at the reflection of his son. "Ethan," he rasped, voice hollow. "You've destroyed everything." "No," Ethan said calmly. "You did that the day you decided your comfort was worth someone else's life." Robert leaned forward. "We gave you a future." Ethan's voice was almost a whisper. "You stole my past." Silence hung between them, the kind that feels heavier than sound. Finally, Robert asked, "What do you want from me?" Ethan stood. "Nothing. You can't give back what you took." He turned away, leaving his father staring at the glass. A man finally trapped in the walls he built himself. Later, Ethan returned to the hospital courtyard, where Miriam sat beneath the old oak tree, watching the sunset. She looked peaceful, finally free from medication, her hands folded gently in her lap. "Did you see it?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I did," she said softly. "All those people listening. It felt like the world finally believed me." He smiled faintly. "They believed you because you never gave up." Her hand found his. "And you believed in me when no one else did." Ethan looked out at the horizon, streaked with gold and violet light. "I used to think justice meant revenge," he said. "But now I think it means rebuilding what they tried to destroy." Miriam nodded. Justice is when love finally gets the last word. The next week, Tanya called with news. "Ethan, it's official. The court approved full charges: fraud, conspiracy, illegal confinement. The Cole family and their partners are facing life sentences." Ethan exhaled. "It's over then." "Not yet," Tanya said. "But it's beginning to be right." That night, Ethan and Miriam stood on the balcony of her new home overlooking the city. Rain had started to fall. Soft, cleansing rain that seemed to wash the world new again. Miriam looked up, eyes glistening. "You know, when they took you, I used to pray every night that one day the truth would knock on their doors and make them listen." Ethan smiled. "Guess it did," she laughed, yet a sound full of life, not pain. And for the first time in decades, they watched the rain without fear of what tomorrow would bring. The city's lights shimmered below them. Justice wasn't a headline anymore. It was a heartbeat. And for Ethan Cole, that heartbeat finally sounded like home. A year passed. The rain still came to Seattle, but it felt different now. Softer, like forgiveness instead of grief. Ethan stood before a crowd gathered outside a brand new glass building on the waterfront. Above the entrance glowed silver letters: the Miriam Reed Foundation. He looked out at the faces: families, survivors, reporters, and children holding photos of the people they'd found again. Behind him, Miriam sat in a wheelchair wrapped in a sky-blue shawl, smiling like sunrise. When the applause faded, Ethan spoke. "Once I believed I was lucky, that my success was a proof I'd done everything right. But luck built on someone else's pain isn't luck at all. It's a debt. Today, we start paying that debt forward." He paused, letting the words settle. "This foundation will help reunite families separated by corruption and neglect. It will fund investigations, therapy, and safe homes. And it will carry one woman's name, because her truth rebuilt my life." He turned toward Miriam, voice softening. "Mom, this one's for you." The crowd rose to its feet, the sound rolling over the bay like thunder made of joy. That evening, the two of them walked through the halls together. Photos of smiling families lined the walls. mothers and sons, sisters and brothers, each one a small miracle. "This place feels alive," Miriam whispered. Ethan nodded. "It is. Every person here proves that love outlasts lies." She reached for his hand. "You gave the truth a home, Ethan. That's all I ever wanted for you." He looked at her, eyes glistening. "You gave me the map back to who I am." Later, in his office overlooking the harbor, Ethan sat at his desk reading a stack of letters. One from a woman in Georgia who'd found the daughter she lost in 1998. Another from a man in Detroit reunited with the nurse who raised him. Each story ended the same way. "Thank you for helping me find home." He leaned back, smiling through the ache. Maybe that's what healing really was. Not forgetting the past, but finally letting it breathe in daylight. Outside, the evening turned golden. Miriam walked slowly onto the terrace, the wind tugging gently at her scarf. Ethan joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "They're saying you're a hero," she teased. He chuckled. "Heroes don't lose sleep filling out paperwork." She laughed softly. "Then maybe you're just a good man who remembered who he was." He looked over the water. "Do you ever think about the years we lost?" "All the time," she said. "But I also think about the years we still have. The world tried to take everything from us, and here we are, watching the sunset." Ethan smiled. "Then I guess we won." As the sun slipped behind the horizon, the building's glass caught the last light, shining like a beacon. Inside, the sign above the entrance gleamed. "The Miriam Reed Foundation, where every family finds the way home." Ethan wrapped his arm gently around his mother's shoulders. For the first time, there was no anger in his heart, only peace. The past was no longer a wound. It was a story, and stories, once told, can't be buried again. They say truth can break you, but sometimes it's the breaking that sets you free. The screen would fade to black. Rain against glass, city lights glowing, and the faint sound of two voices laughing somewhere warm.